Syndicated Source Material.
Get another episode started of Syndicated Source Material. This is the 7th episode that aired on the Radulich In Broadcasting network of Source Material. I want to get into what is called Batman Year 2. This was one of the first graphic novels that I remember seeing on the shelf. I hadn't read a whole lot of Batman up to that point. Obviously knew of the character, but I never read many issues and didn't know much about him. So the front cover of the graphic novel, as I'll say in the episode, is the thing that really grabbed me, that made me go, oh my gosh, look at this. It was Batman with a freaking pistol in his hand, and this crazy looking villain that I've never seen before in a red suit with scythes for hands, and it looked like a really cool graphic novel. So I remember grabbing it and reading it and actually being pretty impressed with what I read. I don't know if it was the first Batman graphic novel I read or not. For some reason, I know I picked up A Death in the Family, which you'd think that would impact me more than this would, considering Robin gets killed in that. Jason Todd Robin. But anyway, this gets released. I'm going to have to take a look here. It just says 2014. So I'm guessing it's probably November of 2014. The original length of this podcast, 1 hour and 38 minutes. So after edit, though, we've got it down to, I think we're talking less than 35 minutes. A lot of that is the plugs that I took off at the end, but there's also a discussion that I had about my trip to Wizard World Comic-Con in Cleveland, I think is where we went. It was either Cleveland or Canton. I think it was Cleveland. No, actually, it might have been Akron, Canton. Anyway, it's 2014. I think we went there at the end of October, so it was like right after Halloween, maybe beginning of November. Anyway, I cut out that discussion. It was just me talking about my experience there, which was pretty much me griping about how I couldn't do a whole lot of things because I've got kids I got to take care of, and when you take them to the Comic-Con, it's not easy to go and do what you want to do, which is fine. But nonetheless, that conversation got taken out of there, so that really chopped down the time frame here. And I really don't think there's much else to talk about here other than the fact that during the editing process today, after cleaning this up, and now when I say clean this up, look, folks, I'm not going to lie, okay? Early podcast career, I don't know if I've gotten better. I think I may have at least chopped down a little bit on the ums and the uhs, but you could tell at the beginning of things when I first started and was doing my own thing, not knowing much about the editing process, how to do things quicker. There's a lot of stuff that could get cut. So I have this program that will amplify something, which, you know, the original podcast, when you listen to it, was really quiet. And I assume that it's just because I didn't have the Levelator at that time, which is a program I've used for years now, but it was very, very muted. So I really feel sorry for the people that downloaded that on Blogtalk and wasn't able to hear it. But my editing process now for cleaning up these source materials for Syndicated Source Material is I take the podcast, I run it through a program to amplify it. But it just so happens that this program also amplifies any ambient noise that it can pick up past a certain range of volume. So when I inhale something like that during the podcast, and my microphone at that point in time was just a headset with a mic, the $12 mic from Walmart, it would pick up me inhaling, and it would increase the volume of that inhale to a very, very audible level. So what ends up happening is when I'm going through and editing this, I have to take those out manually sometimes. Well, today I got smart, did some noise reduction on it to try and eliminate the inhales before I amplified it. Brilliant. Because I did it the other way the first time, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be taking out these inhales till the cows come home. Luckily, I didn't have to do that this time. Or I should say the second time. I did some noise reduction, took out the inhales, then amplified it, then went through and edited it. So anyway, just before I got on here talking about this, the kids came down the stairs, or at the top of the stairs. And when I do my edits, I take all the stuff that I cut, because you can just basically highlight things and then cut them all at the same time. So I'll take all those cuts, put them down in a separate player, condense the silence, and listen to it. I usually listen to it back because I just want to make sure I didn't cut anything out of there that I meant to leave in. So what I should get when I cut that all out is nothing but and then a lot of you knows. Well, anyway, so I got about 2 minutes and 15 seconds of that, and the kids were at the top of the stairs and they were giggling because I was playing it and it was so loud. So anyway, fun story. All right, let's get into Batman Year 2. and we're about to embark upon a DC story, the first DC story that I have had a chance to cover here on Source Material. Most of the stuff that we've talked about has either been independent or Marvel related. Tonight, we're going to cover Batman Year 2. Just a quick little background, Batman Year 2. Batman Year 2 came out in the late 80s, actually between June and September of 1987. It was a storyline that ran through Detective Comics 575 through 578. Obviously, central character being Bruce Wayne, the Batman, and as you can tell, it's called Year 2. Now, for those of you that are familiar with Batman Year 1, this is not a direct sequel. This is something that is more along the lines of just a tale from Batman's early years, as Bruce Wayne became the Batman or was in a fledgling status of the Batman. Now, the storyline itself is written by a guy by the name of Mike Barr. In the foreword of the book, he talks about how the story came about. He said that he had written a story called Batman 1980. I guess he wrote this in 1984, the Batman 1980 story. But this is shortly after Crisis happened. Crisis was DC's big reboot, and of course probably was one of the, if not the first, reboot of a universe. So the point of him writing the story was to kind of give a early rendition of Batman's history and do some, I wouldn't say retconning, but some revisions, we'll say. These 4 issues are about 75% of what he wrote in that Batman 1980 story. At first, when he proposed it to DC back in 84, they were like, I don't think so. Of course, and so what he did is he tucked it away, and then DC came knocking again about 3 years later, 2 or 3 years later, and said, hey, we're looking for, a gritty story for Batman. And of course, hey, what do you know? I've got a story right here. And he pulls it out, and DC runs with it. Pencilers and inkers here. Pencilers were Alan Davis, Paul Neary, okay? They pen issue 1. Apparently what happens is those two guys just part ways with DC. It's either they part ways with DC or they part ways with the book. I mean, right after issue 1 in the storyline. So they have to go and find a substitute penciler and substitute inker. So they find an inker by the name of Alfredo Alcala. That's Paul Neary's substitute. And a little unknown guy, I think at this time he'd actually had some DC work, but guy by the name of Todd McFarlane. So they pick up Todd, they have him pencil part 2 and part 3, and Alfredo Alcala does inks for those. And then for part 4, I don't know if they were just impressed with the way McFarlane did things, but for part 4 of the story, they let McFarlane do the pencils and inks. And wow. I mean, there are some spots in this book visually that are just stunning to me. There's your breakdown of the books, okay? Let's go ahead, and what I'll do here is I'll kind of do what I do every time, and that's summarize the book. It's only a 4-parter, real short story. I'll do my best to keep it quick. The book opens up, now the setting obviously is Gotham. Gotham's not being run by the villains that we know and love right now, the villains we know and hate, Joker, Clayface, and none of those are around. It's right now, Gotham is crime-ridden, but it's got crime bosses. There's crime syndicates and whatnot. We have a newly appointed commissioner, James Gordon. So he's just coming into becoming commissioner here. We're also introduced to a guy by the name of Caspian and his daughter Rachel. We're also introduced to Leslie Tompkins. Leslie is the social worker that apparently had helped Bruce after his parents were killed. Wow. We'll get into who Bruce Wayne is, because I just thought to myself, you know what? Maybe there's some people out there who don't know who Batman is. Now, for those of you that don't know, Bruce Wayne is Batman. Spoilers. Just be prepared. But Bruce Wayne is Batman. Bruce Wayne was, as a young kid, coming out of a movie with his mom and dad. They went into an alley, and his parents were mugged and shot and killed in front of him. And that, of course, provided the impetus for Bruce Wayne to become Batman. Batman is a vigilante hero of the DC universe. One thing that is very notable about Batman is he's one of the most iconic DC superheroes, and he is one of the few DC superheroes that do not have any powers. And he does his job well. Now, book 1, it pretty much opens up where Bruce is showing off this tower that he built for Leslie. Bruce admires Leslie so much for helping pretty much raise him. And one thing about Leslie Tompkins is that she is aware that Bruce Wayne is Batman. Something I was not fully aware that was actually, I did not know that was actually something that went down in the stories. I always thought it was just Alfred or Robin, whatever. I didn't know too many people knew who Batman was. But apparently Leslie knows who Batman is. So anyway, he's showing off this building. He's telling Leslie about how he's building it for her so she can help her patients there. While he's showing this off, it turns out that Rachel Caspian is there with Leslie. Bruce, he kind of looks her over, at her, and he becomes a little smitten with her and kind of invites himself along to dinner with Leslie and Rachel just so he can kind of get to know her. On the way back after dinner, he kind of ditches Leslie and is walking Rachel back to her house. He asks her out on an official date, and she kind of turns him down, and he's like, well, what's going on? She's becoming a nun in a few days. She kind of shuts Bruce down and says, afraid not, I'm about to take my vows. And of course, Bruce is just standing there like, what? One of the things that they had mentioned at the beginning of the book is a previous vigilante by the name of the Reaper. Straight up first issue 1, we're shown that Mr. Caspian, Rachel's father, is indeed the Reaper. Now, the Reaper, let me just go ahead and describe him real quick. The Reaper, imagine, we got a black cape, a helmet that goes on the head that looks similar to a skull, red leather armor with spiked shoulder pads, not like LOD spikes, but we're talking like mini spikes all over the front of it. On his hands, he has a scythe for each hand. They're huge. There's like these, I'm trying to describe it here for you. So we got a scythe on each hand, big, long, sharp hook, where the hand hits the scythe. It's basically covered in a huge, like, ball with spikes on it. So he's a really cool looking character. That was one of the first things that really grabbed me when I first saw this book, was like how cool the Reaper looked. So Mr. Caspian is back in Gotham. The Reaper is back, and he dons a suit. And he goes out, he ends up finding some punks, and he just straight up, these guys are some ne'er-do-wells. I can't remember what exactly they're doing. I think they're mugging some chick, and he straight up slices and dices and kills them. Just shreds them with the scythes. Of course, this gets the attention of newly appointed Commissioner Gordon, who has actually started a partnership with Batman, and he calls on Batman, just like we usually saw in the movies and the shows, with the bat signal, and Batman comes over and talks to Gordon, and Gordon says, hey, we got something's going down on such and such street. We got this guy by the name of the Reaper, apparently, and we're thinking he's back. Right there, Batman's like, okay, I'll look into it. Well, the Reaper shows up again, and this time he just shows up on a street, and he's going to kill a prostitute. And the Reaper, mind you, has a very strict sense of, a moral code? How's that? Considering just about anything that he believes is bringing the city of Gotham down, he is going to eliminate it, including prostitutes. So, here's this chick, and he just, dons the scythes, throws the cloak off, and there he stands in all his Reaper glory, and he gets ready to dice her up when Batman shows up. And we get a fight. The way this fight goes down, Batman does his best, but the Reaper gets the better of him, and he actually loses the fight. Batman loses this fight. He gets messed up pretty bad. There's one point where the Reaper slices his chest and puts an X over the bat symbol. That's actually on the front of the graphic novel. He slices him up real good, proceeds to beat the crap out of him, and Batman has to retreat. So Batman opens up a sewer cover, drops down into the sewers, and we fade to black. The next few panels are morning coming up over the Wayne mansion, and inside lies a beaten, bloody, stinky Batman still laying in his costume. So he just barely made it back home and is just laying there in the middle of the floor. And of course, Alfred shows up, and Leslie is there also. They grab him and fix him up. And they bandage him up, and, he's definitely worse for wear. He's got his ribs bandaged, he's got his eye covered, and he decides that he's not going to obviously stop being the Batman. He's going to take care of this threat of the Reaper. And I'll read to you this last page, because he's sitting there looking at a picture of his mom and his dad, and he says, I've always dreaded this, but perhaps the only way to avenge them is to fight my enemy on his own terms. and he reaches underneath the picture, and there's like a little slide box under there, and he reaches underneath the picture and he pulls out the gun that killed his mom and dad. So I don't know if we're going to call it, we know Batman's kind of messed up in the head already, but he's kept the weapon that's killed his mom and dad. He says he grabs the gun, holds it in the air, and he says, it's to fight my enemy on my own terms, to fight the kind of men who killed them with the weapon that made me what I am, the gun that took their lives. And he holds the gun up, and that's the end of issue 1. We got our introductions, we got our setting. Reaper's in town. He's there to clean up Gotham, but he does it with fierce no quarter. He is killing people left and right. And we have Batman intent on stopping the Reaper from exacting the kind of justice that he believes is not right. So there's part 1. Now we get into part 2. The Reaper is still on a rampage. He's attacking this crime boss that's under the protection by the cops. Okay, so there's this, the cops are trying to, I've got this guy in witness protection, and the Reaper shows up and takes care of the crime boss. Well, the cops turn around and the Reaper's like, well, you know what? You guys are protecting him, so you guys are going to have to feel vengeance also, or feel justice. You guys are no better than the criminals if you're protecting the criminals. So he's killing cops now. Obviously, this is a line that Batman's not crossed. Reaper's definitely, if he's, a vigilante, he's on the very far end of things. In this issue, we learn Reaper's origin, which is very, very similar to Batman's. Mr. Caspian, his wife, and his daughter are coming home from a carnival, and they happen upon a robber coming out of their apartment. And, of course, Mr. Caspian's like, you're not going to get away with this. The robber draws his gun and, instead of shooting Mr. Caspian, ends up shooting his wife instead. And therefore, his wife dies. There's your start to the Reaper. Very similar to Bruce Wayne's, Batman's origin. In this issue, we also see that Bruce and Rachel's dates are going quite well. They're starting to get, a little bit more involved. She has not joined the habit yet. I think that's the word for it. The nunnery? Something like that. She hasn't joined that yet, so she hasn't taken her vows. How's that? That's better. Now, there's this crime boss that's coming in from Metropolis, okay? A guy by the name of Hamer. Commissioner Gordon is aware this guy's coming in, and he thinks, well, this is a prime time because we know the Reaper's going to strike. This crime boss is going to come in, too big of a target for the Reaper to miss, so we're going to set up a sting or a trap. We're just going to be ready. As soon as he lands, we're going to get Hamer there first. We're going to get Hamer first before the Reaper does. They're going to try and get him into custody as quick as possible so we don't have to worry about the Reaper trying to kill him. Well, of course, as soon as the plane lands, the Reaper's right there, ready to take care of business. Now, one of the things I'd mentioned there was about Reaper's claw or Reaper's scythes. Now, in where the hand goes into the weapon, okay, there's like a ball with spikes. Now, there is apparently a little latch or something or other that can drop down and a gun can come out and he can shoot people too, because there's a couple points where he's not just cutting people up, he can shoot people too because there's a gun in these things. So that's neither here nor there. I just want to kind of give you an idea of the variety of weaponry this guy has. So anyway, they're trying to get Gordon and his team are trying to get trying to get him before the Reaper does. Now at the airport, Batman, he's got the same thinking that Gordon does, and he shows up and he confronts the Reaper. At one point, they're fighting back and forth, and Gordon draws his gun and says, hey, I'm glad you're here, Batman. I knew I could count on you. Points it at the Reaper, and Batman actually takes the pistol that he had from issue 1 and shoots Gordon's gun out of his hand and stops Gordon from arresting him. And of course, Gordon's pissed. It's like, what the hell? Thought you were on our team, And Batman ends up saving Hamer. The crime boss saves Hamer. The Reaper has to retreat. He's got too much going on here. We got the cops shooting at him. We've got Batman there. So Reaper gets the hell out. Well, Batman has now saved Hamer. So you got to think about how this looks. Jim Gordon's seeing Batman almost like turn on him. Plus he's saving a crime boss. Now Hamer's not in custody of the police like everything should have been. And you'd think that's where Batman would be taking him. But instead, Batman grabs Hamer and is out of there. Okay? Near the end of the issue, we find that Batman takes Hamer to the mob boss that was waiting for him.
what had happened is Hamer had came in to meet up with a mob boss there in Gotham. Well, Batman takes Hamer and drops him in there and says, look, he's like, I'm calling a truce right now. He's like, you guys want the Reaper as bad as I do. Let's call truce. Let's put our minds together and let's end this Reaper nonsense once and for all. And then we can go back to hating each other. Of course, there's trust issues here. You've got Batman who's fighting, has fought crime for however long up till now. So they don't trust him as far as they can throw him. But they basically tell Batman, hey, look, in order for this to work, you're going to have to partner up with one of ours. And they have this hitman that they have been, that's been, a pretty prominent hitman that they decide to partner Batman up with. And it turns out that their best hitman is a guy by the name of Joe Chill, the man who killed Batman's parents. And there's your cliffhanger for part 2. Now let's get into part 3. I mean, just think about that. Let's reflect real quick. Issue 2 basically brings Batman's now, in Jim Gordon's eyes, not on the side of the law in any way. Batman's obviously formulating a plan to team up with the mob or the crime syndicate to try and get the Reaper. Now he's teaming up. He has to team up with the man that killed his parents. And he recognizes him. I mean, immediately he recognizes who Joe Chill is. He is obviously overcome with a lot of emotion, conflict, whatever. So at the end of issue 2, we're left with, okay, geez Louise, how is this going to go down? Now, as we go into the third part, we start out Batman and Joe Chill are on a mission together. Tensions are kind of high as Batman's known as a crime fighter. And of course, throughout the time also, Batman is reflecting on the night that Chill killed his parents. The whole time, imagine having to face this guy and then realize that you have to work with him in order to obtain the ultimate goal. So Batman's trying to deal with this, but they're on a mission. Now, the mission is to persuade these local drug dealers to participate in this huge drug deal that will obviously get the eye of the Reaper. It isn't like these guys are willing to go with it. That's the whole point of the mission, because Batman and Joe Chill infiltrate this drug house, I guess you'd say. There's many points where Chill is trying to kill the opposition. He's trying to shoot these guys that they are fighting. Batman does his best at every point to not try and kill somebody, and also to try and stop Chill from killing people, because that's not his way. He says there's another way of doing it. So he tries to avoid that at all possible during the whole mission. It shows the value of life that Batman has and Joe Chill has. Obviously a stark contrast. Now the goal of the mission, like I said, was to go in there and persuade these drug dealers. So they make their way into the center, find the head guy, and say, look, this is what we need you to do. And if we've taken care of the rest of your guys, you need to listen to us now. You're going to do this deal. So they put the plan into motion, and it turns out that Jim Gordon, he's got wind of it too. So here we are again. There's going to be something that brings all these people together. Now, the night of the drug deal, Bruce and Rachel go out on another date, and she brings along her father, Mr. Caspian. Now, if you remember correctly who Mr. Caspian is, it's interesting because now we have Bruce Wayne, the Batman, and Mr. Caspian, the Reaper, sitting down and having a nice, cordial dinner together. Bruce, he kind of makes it known that he's very, very interested in Rachel, and wants Mr. Caspian's blessing to marry her. And it doesn't come out all out. He's just, kind of getting the feel of it. Kind of wanting to get the blessing of the father. Okay, so at the end of the dinner, both Wayne and Caspian, they tell Rachel goodbye, and they retire to their uniforms, because this is the night that the drug deal is supposed to go down. Batman dons his bat suit, and Caspian dons the Reaper suit. Now, right away, we're taken to where the drug deal is about to go down, and Reaper's made his way through basically through the front door. There's a wino on the steps, and the guy just straight up kills a wino. I mean, Shink just pulls out the sides, and next thing you see is blood and a broken bottle laying on the ground. No quarter given, that's for sure. Now Gordon is waiting also. He's waiting, and he's eyeballing what's going on. And they see that the Reaper's made his way into the house now. So Gordon's team's like, go, go, go. Everybody starts converging in, and we have another knockdown drag out between Batman, Reaper. Now Joe Chill's involved, James Gordon and his team. As the fight goes on, at one point, you can see Reaper's just killing cops with no problem. Gordon is about to get hit with something, or something blows up beside him, and Batman jumps in, grabs Gordon, wrestles him to the ground to save his life. And as he's on the ground, Gordon says, "You're under arrest." So he's trying to arrest Batman at the same time. Batman gets away. Joe Chill ends up trying to shoot the Reaper, I think, and hits this barrel of ether. The barrel just goes up and explodes, takes half the building out. The Reaper escapes, by the way, and in the wreckage, Joe Chill is hanging from a girder. Batman walks over to him, and Joe Chill's begging him to pull him up. Help me out here, come on. And Batman starts to think of his parents again. He starts seeing his family get shot. And right here, I'm thinking he's just going to walk away and let Chill fall. But he reluctantly helps Chill up, and again, he's looking towards that ultimate goal. Helps Chill up, proceeds to leave the building. Meanwhile, we got Gordon and the rest of the cops. Gordon's obviously okay. They're trying to figure out what's going on. We pretty much end part 3 there. There is a part where, as Batman's leaving with Joe Chill, he sees the ultimate goal is to get the Reaper, but he swears. I'll go ahead and read this real quick. He swears that he's going to get Chill when it's over. Yeah, he says, I saved him only because I need him. This is obviously Batman thinking to himself. I saved him only because I need him, Father. But once we have slain the Reaper, I swear my next victim will be the man who killed you. And I promise he'll know the reason why. That's the end of part 3. All right, let's get into part 4. Last part. We now, in this issue, Bruce pops the question to Rachel, who accepts. Okay? Bruce Wayne has just got engaged, people, to Rachel Caspian, the daughter of the Reaper. So there's that. That happens in part 4. The Reaper, meanwhile, is now getting tired of getting put in these traps. So he decides to spring a trap of his own. He gets a police informant to relay info about an organized crime council meeting. Now, as to whether this is fake or not, initially I thought, well, this is fake. It turns out it's not. So apparently the Reaper had some kind of information. But anyway, he proceeds to have this informant tell the police about this organized crime council meeting. Gordon's team shows up, case in the place, they decide to raid it. Well, there are definitely some criminals there, including Joe Chill and his boss. Mr. M, I think, is what he goes for. Reaper shows up, and this is the panel that grabs me. Out of all four issues, Reaper shows up and he dispatches Mr. M with a scythe through the back. And let me describe this panel to you. Basically, the Reaper's standing there. He's got his scythe out there. At the end of the scythe is just an impaled Mr. M laying there, blood all over the place. Now, as a kid, I don't know, I was 11 or 12 when I was reading this. I was really amazed at the brutality that was in these comics. I couldn't believe the amount of blood and guts and violence. So I don't know if that's always been a Batman thing, because I'm not a reader of Batman. I'm just going to go ahead and go on record. I'm not a huge reader of Batman, so I don't know if this is pervaded throughout at least the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I know prior to, one of the things about Batman was how violent it was, like when it first got started. I've heard stories of some of them, but I've never read any of those issues. But now, we're talking about the 80s here. I didn't think that was common. So Reaper's killed Mr. M, and it's horrific. By the way, this is issue 4 where McFarlane is in all his glory. Pencils and inks. Oh, man. It's awesome. Now, the police are still after Batman here. They think he's obviously with the crime bosses after his actions by saving Hamer, and I think it was issue 2. Throughout this battle, we got Batman there, we got Gordon's team, we got the Reaper, and we got the crime syndicate. Shootout all over the place. Batman actually saves Chill a second time, saves his life, and of course he's conflicted. He is conflicted about what he needs to do. He thinks justice needs to be served, and he needs to kill Joe Chill for, obviously for what has been done to his parents. The battle ends. Reaper is supposedly dead. They don't show that, and none of that. That's just kind of the stuff that's going around. Reaper's supposedly dead. Joe Chill escapes. Batman escapes. Mr. M, most of the crime bosses, the whole crime syndicate's practically eliminated now. Either the police have got him or the Reaper got him. So Joe Chill goes home and he's going to sleep, okay? Batman makes his appearance and has decided it's time to end it. So he gets into Joe Chill's apartment as he's laying there, wakes him up with a gun to his head, but nudges him awake, puts the gun away. All right, so right here, Batman has the weapon that killed his parents. And he tells Joe Chill, he's like, the Reaper's dead, your bosses are dead. So Joe's like, I'm out of here. He's like, there's no sense in us doing anything else before the cops get a hold of me. I'm gone. Batman's like, well, wait. He's like, I want to show you something. He takes Joe to the alley in which his parents were killed. Tells Joe Chill the story of, you're the reason why I am who I am. And Joe Chill doesn't believe it until Bruce takes his mask off. Look at me. I'm the kid. 20 years ago, you killed my parents. And now it's time for me to kill you. Joe Chill is obviously in shock, drops to his knees. Bruce Wayne has the gun, pulls the gun out and has it to Joe Chill's head. Joe Chill kind of says, like, look, I don't think you can do it. Go ahead. I want to see if you got the balls to do it. You know, pretty much goading Batman to pull the trigger. Joe knows that, you know, he's a crime fighter, and if he's on the side of the law, he'd never do it. Bruce has got that gun to his head. Next panel, boom. Joe Chill's shot in the head. But it wasn't by Bruce's gun. It was by the Reaper. And the Reaper standing off to the side, laughing and howling. Bruce is like, can't believe what's going on. Now, remember, Batman does not have his mask on. So the Reaper can fully see who this is. All right? At this point in time, Mr. Caspian recognizes who Bruce Wayne, that Bruce Wayne is the Batman, and that he's the one that's been fighting him the whole time. Batman's in the dark, but Caspian knows who he's been fighting. He grabs Batman, and they end up going to the top of that in construction building that he was building for Leslie Tompkins. And we have a fight up there. Batman is thinking to himself, this will be the last fight of his career, and he plans on walking away. So him and the Reaper go at it. There's a fight that ensues. It's not a very long fight. At the end of the fight, though, Batman finally gets the better of the Reaper. And the Reaper is hanging from one of the steel girders up there at the top of this building. Batman, and throughout the course of the fight, actually knocks the mask off and realizes he's fighting the father of his new fiancée that he just popped the question to. You know, trying to save him, the Reaper says, no, I think he says that he's found a perfect replacement. Lets go of the steel girder and falls to his death. Batman, of course, is in shock, over the fact that he just popped the question to Rachel. He just finds out that her father is the Reaper. As he falls to his death, Bruce Wayne gets the hell out. The police find out who it is. You know, the next day, it's all over the news. Mr. Caspian was indeed the Reaper. Bruce goes to talk to Rachel. Rachel now knows that what her father had been doing, and she's so upset by the fact of what her father had been doing that she feels that she needs to atone for his sins. Gives Bruce the ring back and goes into the habit, takes her vows to become a nun. What has happened now is that the engagement is no more. And that's pretty much where we ended. I mean, there's a panel where at the end of this fight, Batman was intent on keeping his word. He was done. He was going to go and continue to marry Rachel. No more crime fighting. With this turn of events, she's no longer there. He has nothing else to motivate him other than the night. And he dons the costume and is swinging away out there at the end of the issue, continuing to fight crime. That is the end of Batman Year 2. I like a few things in this book. The early Batman. It's kind of neat to see how Batman was back in his early years, just trying to get his feet under him. Not a whole lot of experience. Batman fighting with guns. That was something I thought was pretty interesting, because at the end of issue 4, I guess I forgot to talk about this. At the end of issue 4, he actually takes the gun and buries it in that building. He's never going to use a weapon like that again. Which the cover of Batman Year 2, the graphic novel I'm looking at, he's got a gun in his hand. Very rarely, I can almost say never, have I seen a Batman comic with Batman holding a gun in his hand. So I think that was one of the things that the writer Mike Barr mentioned, was that, he wanted to explore that kind of why doesn't Batman fight with guns? And that is what he kind of put to rest in this story. Another thing about this 4-part series is he was that close not to being Batman. Just that close. Which was a neat part of the story. The contrast of his loathing for Chill versus his necessity to try and keep him around in order to try and get the Reaper. The one thing that I loved about it was the fact that I love this. I feel sorry for him. Batman, we all know, is a tragic character, and he did not get his vengeance. The Reaper took that from him. He had that gun ready to. We all know Batman, Bruce Wayne, more than likely would never have pulled the trigger. He was pretty dang close to doing so. You wonder, coming out of the story, since he had that chance, does he regret the fact that he never did pull the trigger? From what I understand, this book is not in canon. So, of course, we got the new 52 now. So this is all gone. But anyway, you got that out there, too, He didn't get to exact his vengeance. Is that something he regrets or not? Another fun part about the story is the fact that he got his ass kicked. The Reaper really messed him up in the beginning. It isn't Bane style. He doesn't cripple him or anything, but he really gets his ass handed to him there from the Reaper, which is something you normally wouldn't see with Batman. The look of the Reaper, he was a badass villain. Like I said, I'll post some pictures up on the Radulich In Broadcasting Facebook page of what the Reaper looked like. I always thought he was cool. Now, there is a sequel to this book. There is a sequel to Year 2. It's called Full Circle, and I actually own it. I may cover that sometime. It's pretty neat. Full Circle. I mean, by the title, you could probably figure out that it involves something coming back around. One of these days, I might get a chance to cover that. Another neat part about the book is the similarity between the origins of the Reaper and Batman. I thought that was pretty cool. One of the things I forgot to mention at the beginning of this book, but I know I'm going to take the time out right now. Fear the Reaper. That phrase is used a lot in this book. Almost used too much. It's kind of cheesy because Reaper will show up, and the way that they write his words, his little word balloons are all squiggly and stuff to make it look kind of scary. And he said, now you will learn to fear the Reaper. And it's like, oh, come on. But it is what it is. I mean, it's overused a little bit, a little cheesy, but hey, it's the late 80s. Pretty cool. Whatever for that time period. Last thing I'll say is I love the McFarlane art. Todd McFarlane is one of the premier artists of our decade. I mean, nowadays, I guess I should say of the 80s and 90s, specifically the 90s. When McFarlane hits Spider-Man and then proceeds to go into Image and does Spawn, wow, the dude was on fire. And looking at some of his early art, it really surprised me when I first read this book. Actually, I probably read the book like maybe 2 or 3 times before I realized at the end, holy crap, that's Todd McFarlane. When I bought the book, I wasn't, too into who artists were. Sometimes I couldn't even recognize, at an early age, obviously, I wasn't recognizing art and who would draw, but McFarlane's definitely got a style. It was probably when I was in my 20s. I think I was rereading this book and I was like, whoa, wait a second. That totally looks like McFarlane art. And I thought, well, he was just doing a cover for the graphic novel or whatever. No, he did the pencils and inks in that last issue and the pencils of issue 2 or part 2 and part 3. So decent art, loved it. If you're a McFarlane fan, pick it up. It's a great example of some of the early stuff that he did and some of the brutal stuff that he could draw. Big fan, as if you couldn't tell here. So folks, my recommendation, if you like McFarlane art, great. Like I said, it's not canon now, that's for sure. But I can't say that's a very important part of early Batman stuff. Like I said, it was done in the late 80s. But what it does it has a cool villain, cool story. Joe Chill. I mean, Joe Chill meets his death in these issues. I would say that Joe Chill is a pretty iconic Batman villain, considering he's pretty much the one that got it all started. You can check it out. I would advise picking it up if you ever get a chance. It might be hard to find, so if you get a chance to get it cheap, go for it.
Thank you very much for joining us. Do not forget to subscribe to our new home by punching in W2M Network on just about any podcast platform to get all of our content into your audio feed. Also, give a like to the Radulich In Broadcasting Network and W2Mnet.com Facebook page in order to stay on top of everything that we have to offer. If you'd like to follow the Source Material Podcast on social media, just follow @SourceMattCast on Twitter, and we are on Facebook @Source Material Comics Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please feel free to share. We look forward to entertaining you again soon.